He did not fear the sky. He studied it. While others called it unreachable, he measured wind patterns, light shifts, and currents invisible to ordinary eyes. He was not reckless, he was observant. The prison around him was built of stone, but the greater prison was belief. And belief, he understood early, was easier to escape than walls. The island was not empty. It was engineered confinement. High cliffs, restless waves, and a sky that felt deliberately distant. He did not curse the walls. He analyzed them. His father built marvels from thought and precision, yet even genius had been reduced to survival. The boy watched, learned, calculated. Stone could contain the body. It could not contain a mind already mapping the air. His father designed machines for kings and monsters alike, labyrinths that trapped beasts, mechanisms that impressed tyrants. Yet now, that same brilliance was confined to an island prison. The son observed quietly. If structure could hold a creature of legend, it could also be reversed. If design could imprison, design could liberate. The sky was not forbidden, it was simply unengineered, and that meant it could be studied. He did not dream of escape as fantasy. He approached it as calculation. Birds became diagrams in motion. Wings were not miracles, they were mechanics. He studied how air bent around feathers, how lift resisted gravity just long enough to matter. While others saw freedom in flight, he saw structure. The sky was not chaos, it was pattern, and patterns could be mastered. The first prototype failed before leaving the ground. Wax softened, feathers tore. The sea below waited without sympathy. He did not interpret failure as warning. He treated it as data. Every fracture revealed stress points. Every collapse exposed miscalculation. Escape was no longer a wish. It was an equation, and equations once solved do not ask permission from kings or gods. His father warned him about the sun, about heat, about balance. But the warning was not about fire. It was about limit. Do not fly too high. Do not fly too low. Stay within the safe corridor between fear and ambition. The boy listened, but he did not internalize restraint as law. To him, caution was not command, it was a variable, and variables exist to be tested. When the wings were finally secured to their shoulders, the air felt different, not distant, reachable. His father moved first, testing stability, measuring glide. The boy followed. For a moment, gravity loosened its grip. Stone receded. The island shrank beneath them. What had once been prison became reference point. The sky did not reject them, it held. And in that holding, possibility expanded beyond anything fear had described. At first, he honored the corridor his father described, neither too high nor too low, balance, control, obedience to invisible margins. But once the rhythm settled into his muscles, curiosity returned. The wind shifted differently above. Light changed temperature. The higher he rose, the wider the world revealed itself. The boundary was not a wall, it was an instruction. And instructions, he believed, were invitations to understand more. He did not climb in defiance. He climbed in inquiry. Each meter upward answered one question and created another. The sea widened below like a map finally unfolding. The island no longer looked like prison, but limitation accepted for too long. Heat brushed against the wax, subtle at first. The air thinned slightly. He felt it. Not danger. Data. And data to him demanded continuation. The warmth intensified gradually, not as punishment but as physics. The wax responded exactly as it was designed to. It softened. Feathers shifted out of alignment. The structure that held lift together began to lose precision. He noticed the change immediately. This was not surprise. It was consequence unfolding. The sky had not betrayed him. It was behaving consistently. And consistency, once understood too late, offers no negotiation. He adjusted instinctively, compensating for imbalance. One wing strained harder than the other. Air that had supported him moments before began to resist. His father's voice echoed somewhere below, distant, fractured by wind. The boy did not panic. Panic narrows thought. He widened his focus instead, calculating descent angles, measuring glide against instability. He still believed correction was possible. But the sky is impartial. It does not reward intention. The wax continued to yield under heat, feathers loosened, scattering like fragments of a solved equation collapsing. Lift thinned, resistance increased. For the first time, gravity returned as more than theory. It asserted itself fully, not as revenge, not as divine anger, as inevitability. There was a moment, small, precise, when he understood. Not regret, understanding. He had not been reckless. He had tested a boundary that existed for a reason. The difference between knowledge and survival revealed itself in that second. Curiosity had carried him upward. Physics now carried him down. The fall was not immediate chaos. It began as drift, then acceleration. The sea expanded rapidly, no longer abstract but approaching. Wind tore remaining feathers free. His father's figure shrank into distance. The sky that had opened like promise now closed without emotion. There was no thunder, no divine voice, only descent. Impact erased calculation. Water accepted him without hesitation. The wings dissolved into useless fragments. Above, the sun remained unchanged. The sky continued as it always had. The boundary had not moved. He had, and the price of testing it was paid in silence. The sea did not rage. It closed above him with indifference. No storm followed. No divine punishment echoed across the sky. The world continued as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But something had. A boundary had been touched. Not destroyed, not conquered, touched. And touching a limit changes the one who reaches for it, even if the world pretends otherwise. His father descended later, wings intact, carrying the weight of precision preserved. He had obeyed the corridor. He had survived. But survival and transcendence are not the same measure. The sea held silence where the boy had vanished, and in that silence the question lingered. Was restraint wisdom, or was it surrender disguised as caution? Word spread not as condemnation, but as warning. Do not rise too high, do not question beyond the permitted edge. The story began to shrink him into recklessness, into youth, into error. That version was easier to control, but those who listened closely heard something else beneath the retelling. He had flown, and the sky had not rejected him immediately. The truth was less convenient. He did not fall because he was foolish. He fell because he pushed beyond the safe margin defined by fear. Curiosity carried him higher than caution allowed. And though the wax failed, the act itself could not be erased. For a brief span, a human mind occupied air that had belonged only to birds and gods. In the years that followed, boundaries remained. The sun did not dim. The sea did not retreat. Yet something subtle had shifted. The idea that flight was impossible no longer held absolute power. He had proven it could be done, if only briefly. And sometimes in history, brief proof is enough to fracture eternity. His name was spoken carefully at first, not loudly, not proudly, almost as caution, yet repetition changes tone. What begins as warning can evolve into admiration. The boy who rose too high became the one who dared to rise at all. Fear framed him as example. Curiosity framed him as pioneer. The difference depended on who told the story. The sky did not lower itself after his fall. It remained distant, radiant, untouchable. But now it was also measurable. He had mapped its resistance with his own descent. Others began to study air not as myth, but as medium. The boundary had not been destroyed. It had been examined, and examination weakens absolute authority. Fathers retold the event as cautionary tale. Inventors retold it as incomplete experiment. Philosophers retold it as metaphor for ambition. None of them erased the essential detail. He had left the ground. He had moved through the sky under his own design. That fact endured beyond the fall. In time, his ascent overshadowed his descent. The fall became the cost, not the focus. What mattered was that he had tested the edge of what was considered impossible. Limits that had once seemed sacred now appeared negotiable. The sun did not punish him. Physics did, and physics could be understood. The island remained, the sea remained, the sky remained. But impossibility did not remain intact. A human had challenged it and survived long enough to prove it reachable. And even though he did not return, the act of rising altered what others believed could be attempted next. Over time, the fall stopped defining him. The ascent did. Stories trimmed away hesitation and magnified height. He was no longer the boy who failed to descend safely. He became the one who proved ascent possible. In quiet workshops far from the island, craftsmen revisited wing designs, recalculated weight, studied heat and altitude. His mistake became measurement. His descent became instruction, not defeat. Authority preferred the safer version of the story. Obey limits, respect warnings, stay within the corridor defined by those who survived. But beneath that message, another current moved. The sky had been touched, not conquered, not owned, but entered. Once a boundary is entered, even briefly, it ceases to feel divine. It becomes technical. And what is technical can be challenged again. His father's survival complicated the narrative. One man obeyed and lived, one questioned and fell. To many, that seemed proof that caution triumphs over curiosity, yet caution had not expanded the horizon. It had preserved it. Curiosity had widened it, even at cost. The distinction lingered long after grief faded. Centuries passed, and the sky remained unchanged, but humanity did not. Each invention carried a trace of his upward motion. Gliders, kites, sails stretching into wind, all whispered the same defiance. He had not broken the sun. He had broken the certainty that the sky belonged exclusively to gods and birds. The true boundary was never altitude. It was fear disguised as wisdom. His ascent forced that boundary into view. The wax failed, yes, the feathers scattered, but the idea endured. The idea that limits are not commandments, only conditions, and conditions can be studied, adapted, and eventually surpassed. In the generations that followed, the sky was no longer described only as sacred. It became strategic. Sailors studied wind with new seriousness. Builders considered height differently. The fall was remembered, but so was the ascent. Between caution and ambition, a third space formed, calculated risk. His brief defiance forced humanity to confront a truth it had long avoided. Limits are not moral laws. They are physical ones. The sun did not lower itself. It remained distant, indifferent, constant. But indifference carries power. It revealed that destruction was not divine punishment. It was consequence. That difference matters. Gods punish. Nature responds. By separating myth from mechanics, his flight reshaped understanding. He had not angered heaven. He had tested physics, and physics answered precisely. His name hardened into symbol, but the symbol shifted over time. Some used it to warn against pride. Others invoked it to defend ambition, yet neither version captured the full truth. He had not flown to rebel blindly. He had flown to know. Knowledge carries risk, but stagnation carries certainty of limitation, and he had chosen risk. The fall did not erase courage. It revealed its cost. Courage without understanding burns quickly. Courage with understanding builds slowly. His ascent existed somewhere between the two. It was incomplete, but it was real. And real attempts alter the world more than safe obedience ever could. In the end, the sky remained vast but not untouchable. Humanity would return to it again and again, refining what wax once failed to hold. His body fell, but the question he raised did not. How high can we go? And what are we willing to pay to find out? What he proved was not that flight was safe. He proved it was possible. That distinction reshaped centuries. Possibility is more dangerous than prohibition, because once seen, it cannot be unseen. The island remained stone, the sea remained vast, but the sky was no longer myth. It had been entered. and entering something sacred changes its power forever. Those who feared change preferred to emphasize the fall. Those who built preferred to remember the ascent. History often disguises its turning points as tragedies. Yet many revolutions begin with someone who reached too far, too soon. He did not fail alone. He failed ahead of his time. The corridor his father described, neither too high nor too low, became metaphor for moderation. But moderation rarely transforms the world, it preserves it. Transformation belongs to those who step beyond instruction. The boy did not reject wisdom. He tested it, and in testing it, he exposed its boundary. His story endured because it refused simplification. It could not be reduced to pride or punishment alone. It carried ambition, calculation, and consequence intertwined. The sky was not conquered, but it was measured by a human body in motion. Measurement is the beginning of mastery. In the quiet aftermath of centuries, his name still rises whenever limits are challenged, not as caution alone, but as question. How far is too far? Who defines that distance? And when the wax softens, will we retreat or learn how to build better wings? What ultimately endured was not the image of falling, but the act of rising. Over time, the ascent detached itself from the boy and attached itself to humanity. Every attempt to cross a boundary carried his shadow. He became reference, not warning. Proof that limits are discovered by contact, not obedience. The sky remained dangerous, but danger lost its authority. Once entered, even briefly, it ceased to be sacred and became something to be understood, recalculated, and challenged again. The sky did not apologize. It did not adjust itself in response to his fall. That indifference was the most important revelation. Power does not always react. Sometimes it simply exists, waiting to see who will test it. His ascent exposed that the heavens were not guarded by wrath but by law, and laws can be studied. What he touched was not divinity, it was structure. Once that distinction was understood, fear began to weaken. If the sky operated by principle rather than mood, then principle could be learned. The sun did not strike him out of anger. Heat altered wax because heat behaves consistently. In that realization lay something more dangerous than rebellion. There lay knowledge, and knowledge cannot be chained once released. The tragedy was not that he fell. The tragedy was that he reached before others were ready to follow. Timing defines heroes as much as courage does. He carried ambition into altitude without the materials to sustain it. Yet ambition itself was not flawed. It was incomplete. Incompletion does not negate vision. It refines the next attempt. His father survived by restraint. The son changed history by extension. Both were necessary. Survival preserves the present. Extension creates the future. The fall did not cancel the ascent. It confirmed that ascent was possible, but unfinished. And unfinished possibilities have a way of returning, improved, strengthened, and harder to contain. Over time, the memory of the boy merged with the memory of the act. Names fade differently than actions. His body vanished into water, but the image of human wings against sunlight endured. The fall belonged to one life. The ascent belonged to everyone who would later question a ceiling. Myths survive not because they comfort, but because they provoke, and his provoked something irreversible. The story hardened into warning in some cultures, into inspiration in others. Both interpretations missed a deeper truth. He had not flown to defy gods. He had flown to understand sky. That intention matters. Defiance seeks confrontation. Curiosity seeks expansion. Expansion always threatens established order, even when it carries no hatred in its design. What frightened authority was never the fall. It was the precedent. If one boy could rise with crafted wings, others might attempt greater heights with stronger materials. Precedent erodes permanence. Once a boundary has been crossed even briefly, it loses its sacred aura. It becomes technical terrain, waiting for refinement rather than worship. Generations later, humanity returned to the sky not with wax, but with study. Gliders tested wind, balloons tested altitude, engines tested thrust. None of those attempts erased the original ascent, they extended it. His failure did not invalidate ambition. It mapped the first coordinates of a domain previously believed unreachable. The sun still burns, gravity still holds, heat still melts what is poorly built. None of that changed. What changed was perception. The sky ceased to be forbidden and became conditional. Conditions invite experimentation. Experimentation invites risk. And risk, when pursued with discipline, reshapes destiny more profoundly than obedience ever could. What endured beyond the fall was not spectacle, but permission. A silent permission seeded in imagination. The idea that altitude was not sacred ground, only untested ground. That distinction shifted civilization slowly, almost invisibly. Children looked upward differently. Inventors questioned more boldly. The sky did not open in response. Minds did. And once a mind expands, containment becomes temporary at best. No decree announced that the sky had become accessible. No god surrendered dominion. Yet dominion weakens the moment it is tested. His ascent introduced fracture into certainty. Even those who condemned him could not fully erase the image of human wings cutting through air. That image lingered. It unsettled obedience. It reframed impossibility as challenge rather than command. The transformation did not occur in a single generation. It unfolded quietly, through incremental curiosity. Craftsmen studied curvature. Sailors measured pressure. Thinkers separated myth from mechanism. None invoked his name directly, yet his ascent hovered over their work like a shadow of possibility. The fall had closed one life. It had opened a question, and questions, once released, are more difficult to contain than bodies. Authority thrives on permanence. It depends on citizens believing that certain ceilings are fixed by design, not by limitation. His flight disrupted that comfort. If the sky could be entered once, it could be entered again. The difference would not lie in courage alone, but in refinement. Materials would change. Methods would improve. The sun would remain constant. Understanding would not. Over centuries, the narrative softened into symbol. Some reduced him to arrogance, others elevated him to martyr. Both interpretations simplified what had occurred. He was neither reckless fool nor tragic saint. He was a mind in motion, testing a boundary through direct contact. And direct contact, even when costly, carries more truth than inherited restraint ever will. What ultimately survived was the pattern of his choice. He did not wait for permission. He constructed possibility from available materials and tested it against reality. The result was partial success and total consequence. Yet partial success was enough to fracture inevitability. Once a human has occupied forbidden space, even briefly, that space can never fully return to myth. The sea closed over him without judgment. The sun burned without awareness. Nature did not celebrate or condemn. That neutrality became the hidden revelation. It was not the gods who enforced the limit. It was physics. And physics, unlike divine wrath, can be studied, calculated, and eventually negotiated with through design. His ascent marked the first contact between ambition and altitude in human memory. Every later flight, from fragile gliders to roaring engines, carried the echo of that contact. The difference was not courage, but preparation. Materials replaced wax, structure replaced improvisation, but the original impulse remained unchanged, the desire to test what stands above us. Legends warn, history adapts, innovation advances. His story sits at the intersection of all three. The fall teaches consequence, the ascent teaches possibility. Together they form a complete lesson. Freedom is not found in ignoring limits, but in understanding them deeply enough to move beyond their first appearance. In the end, he did not conquer the sky. He confronted it. Confrontation revealed structure. Structure revealed method. Method revealed future attempts. The boy fell. The idea rose. And ideas, unlike wax, do not melt under heat. They persist, waiting for better hands to carry them higher than before. The boundary he tested did not disappear after his fall. It remained intact, radiant and indifferent, but indifference strips authority of mystique. What once felt sacred now felt mechanical. The sky no longer belonged exclusively to gods or myth. It belonged to conditions. And conditions, once understood, can be reworked. He did not live to see refinement. He lived long enough to make refinement inevitable. In every era, there are those who accept the ceiling and those who measure it. He belonged to the second kind. Measuring does not guarantee survival. It guarantees clarity. The clarity he earned came at full cost, but it revealed something permanent. Limits are not moral judgments, they are thresholds of understanding. Cross them blindly and you fall. Study them deeply and you return stronger. The world rarely rewards the first to test a frontier. It rewards the ones who refine it afterward, polishing risk into method. Yet refinement depends on someone absorbing the initial consequence. His fall became foundation not because it was glorious, but because it was measurable. Reality replaced myth with data, and data, once gathered through impact and error, transforms future danger into disciplined progress rather than blind ambition. Centuries would pass before humanity truly mastered the sky, but mastery did not begin with engines. It began with contact. Contact shatters illusion. The moment he entered altitude under his own construction, the heavens stopped being untouchable. They became conditional terrain. Conditions demand study, not worship, and study always produces return. He did not reach permanence, he reached precedent, and precedent is the quiet beginning of revolution. Revolution rarely announces itself loudly. It begins as altered perception. After his ascent, the sky could never again be described as unreachable without doubt. Doubt weakens obedience. Obedience weakens authority. Authority weakens myth. The chain reaction did not happen in a single era, but it began with one calculated rise. He did not overthrow the heavens. He destabilized certainty, and destabilized certainty reshapes civilizations more effectively than open rebellion ever could. In the end, what separated him from legend was intention. He did not rise to be remembered. He rose to understand. Understanding cost him everything, but it exposed the architecture of a limit long treated as divine. Architecture can be mapped. Mapped structures can be reinforced or surpassed. His body failed against heat. His inquiry did not. Inquiry persists beyond the one who begins it. There are always two reactions to someone who crosses a boundary. One is fear, the other is imitation. Fear tries to freeze the lesson into warning. Imitation studies it into progress. His story survived because imitation proved stronger over time. Each new attempt to rise carried better materials, stronger structure, deeper calculation. The fall remained part of the narrative, but it no longer defined the horizon. His name endured not as proof of failure, but as evidence of threshold. A threshold is not a wall, it is a point of transition. He reached it without sufficient reinforcement, and the cost was immediate. Yet reaching it altered what came after him. The sky did not become kinder, it became measurable. Measurement transforms myth into method. Method transforms danger into design, and design returns stronger than fear ever was. The final truth of his ascent is not tragedy, but transmission. He transmitted proof that elevation was attainable, even if unsustainable at first. Transmission matters more than survival. Survival preserves the present. Transmission alters the future. His body fell into water, but the evidence of height entered memory permanently. And once memory records altitude as reachable, no generation can fully return to ground without questioning why it remains there. He did not conquer the sky. He confronted it and paid the full price of that contact. Yet conquest was never the point. The point was revelation. Revelation that the heavens obey structure, not anger. That altitude responds to design, not prayer. His fall closed one life, but his ascent opened a direction. And direction once discovered cannot be erased. The sky remains vast. The question remains louder. How high will we build next?